Lord, I lift your name on high. Lord, I lift your name on high. Lord, I love to sing your praises. Lord, I love to sing your praises. I'm so glad you're in my life. I'm so glad you're in my life. I'm so glad you came to save us.
I want you to go back into the book of 1 Kings, into the 20th chapter. And as we go into the 20th chapter, I want us to pay attention. Where'd it go? There it is. I want us to pay attention to about, well, you can start reading about verse 35, read down to verse 43. But for the sake of time, I'm going to focus in on verses 39 through 40. Because in verses 39 and 40, the king passed by, and he cried to the king, and this is the individual that has some great questions going on with regards to his responsibility and what he had done and the acknowledgement that he has. So as the king passes by, your servant went out into the midst of the battle. Behold, a man turned aside and brought a man to me and said, guard this man. If for any reason he is missing, then your life shall be for his life, or else you shall pay a talent of silver. Verse 40. And while your servant was busy here and there, he was gone. And the king of Israel said to him, so shall your judgment be. And you yourself have decided it. You brought it on yourself. But see, you look at this, and the guy says, you know, it's reminiscent of Acts the 16th, the Philippian jailer. He's assuming everybody's gotten away. He's about ready to kill himself because he had been given a charge. And he failed. He thought he failed. Well, this man was acknowledging, I failed. And there are consequences to my failure. I'm willing to accept them. I wonder how many people truly today are willing to accept the consequences of their failures, of the things that they have done. This man was open. He was unabashed. Here's what I was told to do. Here's what the consequences. I was told this would happen if I failed. So I want you to exercise on me now my punishment because I failed. It's a great lesson here, powerful lesson. And I think many, as we look at our lives, we fail too. We got busy here, there, and everywhere. You know, think about when we were home, living with our parents. And our father would give us an assigned task. And we'd get so caught up watching birds in the sky or any number of things. And then all of a sudden we'd come into being called into account. Well, did you get this done? And no. Why not? Well, bottom line is I was busy doing what I wanted to do. Not what you would have me to do. I was busy here, there, and everywhere. And we can learn a great lesson from this, and how vital it is. We get distracted, and there is a lot of distractions in life. Back when Jesus was teaching the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew the 6th chapter, as he gets to a concluding part of this segment of worry and anxiety, and really talking about the kingdom and all the other things. He said, but seek first his kingdom and his righteousness. See, so many who make the claim of being followers of Christ come up really short, really deficient when it comes to this. Because what they allow themselves to do is they allow themselves to get entangled in all the other things of life. And they put other things first. You know, strange things about people. People will make time and take time. For what they like and want to do. out in my garage, I have golf clubs. And Adam bought me a new golf club a year ago. And he took my clubs and played golf, and he said, Dad, your driver's terrible. So he bought me a new golf club. I've never used it. People ask me, do you like to play golf? And I go, oh, sure, I like to play golf. I haven't played golf in over a year. How much do I really like playing golf? If I like playing golf, I do it as a social event. Or I do it when David Odorizzi is in town. Because David Odorizzi reminds me, he said, oh, you don't like to be competitive. And I don't. Unless it's with David Odorizzi. And I like to go out on the golf course and I like to beat him. Or if Don Mullins wants to play golf, so I can beat him. But I'm not competitive. Not at all. It's fun to socialize, to interact. But if something was really important to me, I would make time for it. Are there things that are important to you? Do you make time for them? Physically, we make time for one another if they mean something to us. If they truly are important to us, we will sacrifice for them. If my children or my wife says, will you do this? Yes, without hesitation. As long as it does not put me afoul of something of a spiritual nature. And the weird thing about it, my boys know that. They may not be where they should be spiritually, but they know that of Linda and I. My grandchildren know the same thing, though they're not where they should be spiritually. I will make time, I will take the time, because that's important. So see what was going on back here in 1 Kings 20. It really wasn't important to that man. Something else became more important, more driving. And it cost him greatly, truly greatly. Paul, when he writes in Colossians, 3rd chapter, verse 2, he talks about we need to set our thoughts on things above, the right hand of God where Christ is seated. Well, again, that goes back to the idea of focus. And when we are really locked in on something, that is going to be the primal drive of our life. And we're not going to get busy here, there, and everywhere, where that gets in as a conflict to what should be the primal drive in our life. When I put on Christ in the waters of baptism, everything in my life changed at that moment. Before that, after that, everything changed. I was not raised in the church. I was raised religiously, but I was not raised in the church. And once I put on Christ, everything changed. Priorities changed, directions changed, everything changed. Just like when or becomes engaged to, things change. It all becomes single-minded devotion. This person is the most important person in my life. Nothing else comes before that person. That's what the scriptures teach. That's what we embrace. And we are joined together with Christ. And Paul uses the analogy of a husband and wife in Ephesians, the 5th chapter. And so we look at all these things. And we say, well, I realize I can't become entangled. Another great passage that deals with the idea of being busy here and there and taking the lesson from 1 Kings 20 and applying it to us. Remembering that those things that were written aforetime are written for our instruction, as Paul talks about back in the book of Romans in the 15th chapter. But I want you to go into 2 Timothy, Paul's last letter that we have record of. Well, actually some argue that Titus is written after 2 Timothy, but that's another thought altogether. But go into 2 Timothy, 2nd chapter. And what Paul does here is he reminds Timothy, and he reminds all Christians, who you are. And he talks about a vocation. And in this discussion, he talks about various things. He starts out, well, you're my son, and you're a son of God, and so on. But he gets to the part of a soldier quite quickly. And if you drop down in verse 4, no soldier, and this would take our thoughts back to 1 Kings again, no soldier in active service entangles himself in the affairs of everyday life so that he may please the one who enlisted him as a soldier. No soldier entangles himself. I remember when I preached in Las Vegas, we had a lot of individuals that were in the military. We had airmen, we had officers, we had engineers and different things of that nature. And I remember one time, and it happened at our house, that one of the airmen needed money, and he was going to go out and get a part-time job. And we were just sitting around talking about it, and one of those who was in the conversation was an officer. And the officer said to the enlisted man, "Have you checked with your commanding officer yet?" And he goes, "No." He said, "Well, unless you check with your commanding officer, you will not get a part-time job. You enlisted in the service to the United States Air Force. You belong to the United States Air Force." And I go, "Well, that's ridiculous." And I was given the high eyebrow look, and I wasn't even in the military, and I started cowering down. But I go, "That's ridiculous." And then the explanation was given that that individual needs to be at a moment's call to go out and protect and to defend. And so you have to ask permission. Well, same thing is true with us. We have been enlisted. And we can't just do the things that we want. We can't get entangled in the affairs of everyday life. And I'm not talking about part-time job or anything of that nature, but I'm talking about the principle involved therein. It is easy for life to ensnare us. It is easy to get caught up like a spider's web. Once a month I come down to the church building, and I drag out the pesticide killer. And I go around, I try to knock down the spider webs, and I spray all around, and invariably then we get little bugs that end up dead and going like that on the floor. And the women go, "Oh, pick it up!" And, now, after I saw Janice pick one up this morning, kill it, I go get Janice, she'll pick it up. I don't have to be there. Get her. But, you can see as you go around knocking down the spider webs, how many flies and other insects get caught in the web. Entangled. And that's exactly what happens to us. We get so caught up in life that we fail to appreciate just what life is truly all about. We have a lot of uncertainty in life, and it is definitely bearing on us. We have a lot of pressure in life, and it is easy to get entangled, to lose sight of really what's important. Back in Matthew, the 25th chapter, first 13 verses, Jesus teaches a parable about the 10 virgins. And what the parable lays out, and it lays it out very, very, that 5 were really prudent. 5 had locked in and were waiting for the coming. And 5 got busy here, there, and everywhere. And when that time came, they were ill prepared. And what they did, if you look back at Luke, the 14th chapter, find a similar example. Luke 14, verses 14 through 24, they began to offer excuses. "Oh, we did this or we did that, and we couldn't follow through here." Because they were busy elsewhere. Dan and Randy both run construction companies. And Dan and Randy tell their employees, "Here's what I want you to do." At the end of the day, they come back and go, dude, why aren't you done? What's been the problem? Well, the roach coach came and I was kind of hungry. And then the other one came, the one that we all like to go to. It came a couple hours later. I was kind of hungry again. I got busy talking to this one and that one. And then I had a little problem here, and then I got a phone call. How long are Dan and Randy going to put up with that? Because basically what the guy's saying is, what I want to do is more important than what you wanted me to do. I was busy here, there, and I didn't do what I needed to do. Dan and Randy hired those men to do that job. That's what they're hired for. The man back in 1 Kings 20, he said, here's your job. There's going to be consequences if you don't follow through with it. Dan and Randy are going to send those guys like that packing. You're gone, you're done. What do you think about us with regards to the Christ? And if we're busy here, there, and everywhere and leaving undone the things we need to have been doing, we need to be preparing. Do you realize that? Life is given to us in order to prepare for that which is to come. And we don't want to get so tied up in life that we forget the importance of what's involved in life. Solomon in the book of Ecclesiastes deals with what's involved in life and what truly is important in life. If you go into the 3rd chapter, he begins talking about the importance. There's a time and season for every event under heaven. So in Ecclesiastes, what Solomon is writing, he's saying never forget that throughout life, you need to be reminded and to be focused and not get busy over here or over there. One of the things that when you teach elementary school, and I haven't taught it very often, but I did do some substitute teaching at elementary level, the hardest thing is to keep the kids on task. You give them an assignment, and then you walk around the class making sure that they're staying on task. All right, get back to what you need to be doing. We need to be reminded of what life's all about. We need to stay on task. And so Solomon says that what you've got in life is you have this relative cycle of time. You're going to live, you're going to be born, you're going to die. You're going to do this, and, well, let's look at it exactly as he lays it out in Ecclesiastes. Many of us know it from a folk song that was made famous, and Byrds did it, but Pete Seeger did it prior to the Byrds having done it, and Judy Collins did it before them, and so on and so forth. But go into Ecclesiastes, and we're going to drop into the 3rd chapter, and in that 3rd chapter, and this Bible doesn't want to follow my instructions anymore, it's been a while. There's a time, verse 2, there's a time to give birth and a time to die, a time to plant, a time to uproot what is planted. See the cycle? A beginning and an end, a time to kill, a time to heal, a time to tear down, time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn, time to dance, time to throw stones, and a time to gather stones. And all the way through, he goes through this relative cycle about life. But then he goes on and talks a little bit further in the 4th chapter in verse 16, and in the 9th chapter in verse 7. And he says, you know what? Life is uncertain, and life isn't always fair. But regardless of that, what you have to do is remain focused, and you can't be busy elsewhere. Now, as you go through life, yes, enjoy it, embrace it, accept it, celebrate it. But whatever you do, don't have to live it down. That he gets into in the 11th chapter. But he does talk, as you can see on the overhead, about how life is to be enjoyed. And sometimes we think, oh, being a Christian is just so laborious, so tedious, and there's not much to enjoy. Quite contrary. There's everything to enjoy. And to enjoy it with celebration and vivaciousness. because we're not being caught up in sin. We know what we need to do. We're working toward that end. And we're not busy here and there and everywhere. Because ultimately, Solomon says, well, flip over to the 12th chapter, passage we're all familiar with. Look at the 12th chapter in verse 13. Here's what he said. When all has been said and done, here's the point of life. And that's kind of what we want to understand. The conclusion, when all has been heard, is fear God, keep his commandments, because this applies to every person. Because God will bring every act to judgment, everything which is hidden, whether it is good or evil. So the 10 virgins, they're told, hey, get yourself ready because this time is coming. For the rest of us in life, get yourself ready because this time's coming. You need to be in an active state of preparedness. And you don't need to be busy here, there, and everywhere. Because there are consequences when we fail. And you realize that the whole point of life is to get from this point in time into an eternity with God. That's the whole point. And that everything about this life is predicated on stewardship. That's what was going on in 1 Kings 20. That was what was going on when Jesus talks back in Matthew 25, when Jesus is addressing the issue about anxiety and seek first the kingdom and his righteousness. It's dealing with that realm of stewardship. That's what he's talking about. That's where his direction is. Have we gotten so busy elsewhere we've forgotten about stewardship? Again, that's Randy and Dan's work. They hire individuals. They give them a job. This is your job. Do your job, do it well. You're going to be called into account on it later on in the day. Don't get busy here, there, and elsewhere. Just stay on task. Whenever I cook, I know it drives my family crazy. Because when I was taught how to cook, how to bake, my grandfather said, you're on task. Here's what you do. You stay on this task, you finish it, you clean up what you do. Then you go to the next task. So when I cook at home, I'll prepare something. I'll get it into a state where I can leave it for a while. I'll then clean all my dishes, all my pots, all my pans, all my utensils, before I go to the next one. And Linda goes, that's crazy. Just let it pile up over here. We'll get to it later on. I pride myself in the fact that when my meal is cooked and done, that the only thing left to be cleaned up are the dishes and utensils on the table. And now with the advent of paper plates and paper bowls and plastic utensils that are given by carry-out places, and if you just ask them or tell them, I'm going to steal a lot of these, go ahead, take what you want. Oh man, makes life so much better. I'm planning ahead. We don't have to clean dishes. We don't have to buy dishwashing soap. We just chuck it. And it's biodegradable. It's not plastic, except the utensils. Oh man, could life get any better? But see, all of this is dealing with the realm of stewardship, staying on task. And my task in life is to go from this point in time into an eternity with God. And if I don't do that, I have absolutely failed. I've gotten too busy, tangled here, and I failed my whole point of existence. I failed, and I failed miserably. D. Bowman, at the end of every lesson I've ever heard him preach, says, if you miss heaven, you've missed it all. How true that is. And it's all because, and if we miss heaven, it's because we've gotten busy here, there, and elsewhere. When the author of Hebrews wrote his epistle. He was challenging those Hebrew Christians who had become somewhat complacent, and they no longer were doing the things that they needed to do. They were allowing the Judaizing teacher to influence them, and they were getting caught up doing different things. And so throughout the book, he talks about that which is better. But he also talks and gives them the challenge to look to themselves and be sure they haven't gotten entangled elsewhere, because to some degree they had. Look at the 10th chapter in verse 24. You can see it on the overhead. In verse 24 of chapter 10, the writer said, "Let us consider how to stimulate one another to love and good deeds." I love that. Some translations have the word provoke. I kind of like that word too. I'm provocateur. Go around provoking people. I'm good at that. But the idea of stimulate gives a little bit more positive connotation. So what we're doing, we're trying to stimulate one another. To what? To love and good deeds. Now, and not forsaking our own assembling together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near. Now, the day drawing near, I don't think it's the first day of the week. I think it could be implied or made applicable to that. I think it's referring to the destruction of Jerusalem. Nevertheless, he said, there's a day coming when we have to be prepared for it. And we can't be busy here and there and forget really what it's all about. We have to remain focused, directed, alive, and vibrant. But how many have gotten busy here, there, and elsewhere? That we've gotten too busy to really be about the things we need to do spiritually. Peter, in 2 Peter, the 3rd chapter, after he talks about Paul writing some things that are hard to understand. Some of the things Paul writes are hard to understand. People can distort and move to their own, into their own way. But then he says in verse 18, "But grow in the grace and knowledge of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ." Well, how many of us are taking the time to grow in the grace and knowledge? In Colossians, the 1st chapter, verse 10, Paul writes, "So that you may walk in a manner worthy of the Lord, to please him in all respects, bearing fruit in every good work, and increasing in the knowledge of God." The 111th Psalm in verse 2 talks about the same thing. Increasing in the knowledge of God. How many of us have gotten busy here, there, and elsewhere and don't take the time to be involved in study? I'm so proud when I get up in the morning and I go out to get a cup of coffee, and it's kind of, what's the point of coffee? Because the coffee that I drink is decaffeinated, so what's the point? But I go out there nonetheless, and as I go out and get whatever you want to call it, and I drink it, I notice that in the area that's now my office, used to be the family room, just off the kitchen, there sits Linda. And she has her little portable desk for her lap. She has her Bible opened. She has a notebook there. And she's going through her daily reading. And invariably, I'll sit down, and she'll ask a question, or she'll talk about what she's been reading. She does it every morning. And I know that she does it for about an hour. I give her that hour. Oh, that's so magnanimous of me, isn't it? But I know that that's what she's doing, and I don't want to interrupt her. How many of you take an hour of a day to study? But maybe we've gotten too busy. We've gotten entangled in so many different things. And if, I want to ask you a question, and for those of you that are here, feel free to ring out the answer. How many minutes a day do you think, on average, an American spends looking at a screen? How many minutes? Oh, come on, you got to have an answer.
10 minutes.
10?
10 hours a day.
No, give me minutes.
180.
Too low.
600.
Too low.
1,200.
Too high. 444 minutes a day in one form or another, looking at a screen, television, computer, or phone, which comes to 7.4 hours a day. You work 8 hours a day. Some of you work more. You sleep 8 hours a day. How many hours are there in a day? 24 hours a day. Trick question. 24 hours a day. So that leaves you about 40 minutes-ish a day that you don't utilize anything doing. That's ridiculous. That is a ridiculous amount of time. And yet we go, well, I really don't have time to study. I don't have time to do this. I don't have time to stimulate and encourage. Because you're busy here, there, and everywhere. And I realize that when we point things out like this, yeah, it hurts. It hurts because I'm guilty of it too. And I know that part of what I do is working with the computer, writing, and things of that nature. But whoa, I mean, when you think about that, that's 2,701 hours yearly, or, if my math is correct, 112 days. We're told we ought to pray without ceasing. We're told that we need to bear one another's burdens out of Galatians 6, 1 and 2. We're too busy then to lend strength to one another. The strong needs to lend strength to those without strength in Romans the 15th chapter in verses 1 through 3. We get so busy that we begin to lose precious friends because other things become too important. We don't have time for them. So many more things. I've gotten busy so much talking during this lesson that I'm not going to have time to complete it all. I've been busy here and there, flapping my lips here and when I should have been over here. Did I do it on purpose? Sure, I'm going to go with that story. But not really. Because when you begin to look at it, it is so expansive that I'm just talking about those things that we do as individuals. That we get busy here, there, and elsewhere. What will you give in exchange for your soul is a question Jesus asks of a man. And that's found back in the book of Matthew, the 16th chapter, verse 22. Now that man we began looking at, he acknowledged, I failed. I was busy here, there, and elsewhere. I acknowledge it. But see, we haven't even talked about how as a congregation of the Lord's people, we can get busy here, there, and elsewhere. And we can become deficient. So I'm going to leave it here, and at some point, somewhere along the line, we're going to come back and we're going to visit a little bit more. We're going to talk a little bit more about, as an individual, how we can get busy here, there, and elsewhere, and really put our soul's salvation in jeopardy. But use that just as a trigger to get us to the point where we begin to look at a congregational level. Because I think that's important as well. So at some point we'll come back and we'll visit this again. Because I think it's really important. And it's not because I want to yell at somebody, because I would like to think I'm not yelling at anybody whatsoever. But rather simply challenging us. Whenever I preach a sermon, I'm preaching it at me as much as I'm preaching it at anyone else. And we always have to look to ourselves, lest we too fall into that snare. I don't want to be busy here, there, and everywhere. My sole direction, my sole drive is to make it to heaven. Well, the lesson is yours this morning. And as always, if any is subject to the invitation, we would encourage you and invite you to contact us. We'll be more than happy to help you, to do what we can to help you spiritually. For those that are in the audience, if you need something, need prayers of the congregation or whatever, let it be known while we stand and sing the song that has been selected.